Hi, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the amyloid hypothesis. And by amyloid, I mean the amyloid plaques. And of course, the tau tangles. Those two kind of tend to go together. And my problem with the theory and is beginning to be debunked, but we're getting to know more and more about it. So the theory is simply this: Alzheimer's disease is caused by the formation of certain proteins called of the plaques from certain proteins called amyloid, which tends to disrupt transmission between two neurons. And remember that it all starts at the level of the synapse. In my other video, I talked about the collapse of the synapse. So amyloid plaques, the theory goes, says that there's so much of this that it disrupts transmission. And once you disrupt transmission at a synapse, you disrupt function, and eventually you disrupt structure. The brain eventually begins to shut down if enough of this happens. The other thing also is that, and this kind of happens later. So the amyloid plaques, 20, 30 years building up in the brain. The tau tangles, maybe about 10 years, maybe 15 years before you actually start seeing symptoms, as they say. So these tangles, they're called neurofibrillary tangles. They occur inside the neuron, and so they disrupt the function of the neuron and the structure of the neuron. So one happens on the outside, as the amyloids, and one happens on the inside, as the tau tangles. Okay. And eventually the brain shuts down, and then you have full-blown Alzheimer's disease. Here's the problem. Neuropathologists have looked at the brain of elderly people who have died for whatever reason, and of course, those who have died from not Alzheimer's disease, and they've looked at those who have died from Alzheimer's disease. And many of them will tell you that they've seen the same pathology, the same the same things under the microscope, amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brains of people who did not demonstrate any form of cognitive defects. Yes, they were old. Yes, they kind of forgot some things, but it wasn't of the full-blown Alzheimer's disease. They still function normally. Their activities were not hindered by any much. So and then here's another thing, though, why I have a problem with this theory. They found out that some of these drugs, when they were able to make drugs, whether in the lab or to give lab rats, mice, drugs that would remove the plaques and remove the tangles. I'm not sure if they could remove the tangles, but the plaques for sure. When they removed the plaques, for the most part, it didn't help the situation. And secondly, it even made it worse. So that may not be the golden bullet or the silver bullet we're looking for. And as you probably know, over 95% of the drugs that are being tested and used for people with dementia or any other kind of cognitive impairments simply haven't been successful. So it's not, and most of them have to do with amyloid plaques, by the way. So it's not about amyloid plaques. And really, it's not just about neurotransmitters, because there are some drugs that help to boost the neurotransmitters, those chemicals at the synapse, and it did nothing to stop the progress of the disease. It may have offered some kind of symptomatic relief that was brief, but it really didn't do it to stop the progress of the disease long term. The other thing about the amyloid plaques is that everybody makes amyloid. I mean, especially if you turn 40, you tend to have more amyloid in your brain than people who are not 40 yet. And what amyloid does is actually part of the brain's response. Everybody makes amyloid. So what amyloid does, amyloid is an antimicrobial. That means it helps to deal with toxins and bugs in the brain. It also binds heavy metals like mercury, which is toxic to the brain. So really, in some ways, amyloid is your friend. The problem is that it begins to accumulate when it shouldn't. And that could come as a result of the brain not being able to clear out amyloid as it is formed. So when it is formed in the brain or in the body and it gets into the brain, the body should be able to clear that out effectively. And when it's done its work, it should clear it out. So that's what things like sleep and exercise are for. They help in the clearing of the amyloid plaques. And probably we'll talk about sleep in another segment. But the body should be able to clear it. So the problems arise when it begins to accumulate. But what I'm trying to say is that it's other conditions that cause the amyloid plaques. Those other conditions are not being addressed by the drugs that we have, the popular drugs that we have. Everybody's just looking at the amyloid. Everybody's looking at the amyloid. It's kind of like with cholesterol. Everybody's looking at cholesterol. Cholesterol is a problem. Sometimes cholesterol is created as a result of the problem. It's kind of like an ambulance. There's a road traffic accident. There are people dead, and then the ambulance comes in, brings their staff to help solve the problem. And somebody from outer space, an alien coming and visiting, thinks that the ambulance is the problem, and therefore it's like we're going to attack all ambulances so that we don't have road traffic accidents again. Well, that's kind of like the kind of crazy thinking that we're looking at here as well. We're looking at the amyloid as the enemy, well, because it's the thing that we can most identify. But removing the amyloid, as I've said, does not solve the problem. So we need to take it a few steps back and really see what's happening. And what we now know is that there are about 3 or 4 main things that happen. One are nutrient deficiencies. The brain is not getting enough of the nutrients, including the oxygen that it needs to function. That's one. Number 2 is high levels of toxicity, the brain being exposed to all kinds of things, from toxins in the food and the atmosphere in plants, electromagnetic frequencies. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. And then number 3, I can remember now, is chronic inflammation, chronic neuroinflammation, which happens in everybody's brain, some worse than others. And again, it's as a result or a response to what's going on in the atmosphere. So those are the 3 things that really start the ball rolling for Alzheimer's disease. And if we can address those 3 things, and then maybe add to it, remove all of the amyloid, that might get some results. And so we talk about these in subsequent videos. So please feel free to check them out. Bye.